All right, Overhand Follow Through by Jay Wilburn. Cobb Jolson wasn't the oldest man in his neighborhood when this week began, but he was on his way, let's say on his way there now. We'll add in the number of people older than you always got smaller and smaller until you were at the top of the heap. His wife Piper had just turned 80, and he was almost 9 years older than her. All right, there we go. 15 Fairfax Circle, a cul-de-sac with fewer than 15 houses on it, was their retirement home. It was too much house and too much yard for the two of them, even when kids or grandkids visited, but he hadn't worked his way up in life to have to wait on any bathrooms or to wonder where things should go. All right, he had no need for an office, but there was a perfect place for it, so he had one. He had a media room with fine black recliners set up theater style, but he mostly watched TV in bed. Until the zombies rose earlier that week and the power went off for good. Let's say he used to watch TV in bed, comma. I could have put that at the end, but I think it's better this way. He used to watch TV. I'm going to actually make this italics too. It's not necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. He used to watch TV in bed until the zombies rose earlier that week and the power went off for good. No more TV in bed or in that pitch black media room, and he might have been... All right, I'm going to put that, make this a new paragraph. And he might well have been, let's say. And he might well have been the oldest man in the state by the time he was forced out of the side door of his garage onto a small square of concrete pad. Yeah, that's good. All right, Cobb forced the door closed behind him. All right, I got a dropped word there. And when he felt it latch, he took a moment to catch his breath. That moment also allowed him to realize he was outside and exposed to the creatures eating people alive. Let's say all through the world now. So much for all that square footage. He could probably get back in through the screened porch and separate sunroom if he remembered where the spare key was, but going back inside might be a terrible idea. The air stunk of carbon smoke. It was stunk of the carbon from dirty smoke. It was like the forest fires last summer where that nose-burning odor permeated the air for weeks. These fires he could see, though. Black smoke billowed up. No, this is a problem here. The fires today. Say the fires irritating his nose. The fires irritating his nose today, he could see, though. Black smoke billowed up behind the forest in the direction of town. Two other blazes were within sight of his side yard. The property values of Cold Spring Heights subdivision were dropping fast. Buyer's market, he muttered, and then coughed on the acidic air. Cobb used his elbow to stifle the noise because, of course, he wasn't the oldest man for miles for no reason. Zombies. Those Walking Dead things that belonged in kids' comics and trashy horror nonsense wandered the roads, the manicured lawns, and the green spaces no longer supported by HOA dues. HOA stands for Homeowners Association. I know a lot of people in the United States know that, but I had a couple folks watching from overseas, and that's not something they're familiar with. HOAs are kind of like a neighborhood organization that creates rules that everybody has to follow. They kind of have a infamous or dubious reputation in America. A lot of people hate them because they don't like being told what to do. That's a very American thing, not liking being told what to do. And so there's a lot of conflict over HOAs. Now there's other people who want their neighborhoods and yards to look all pretty and want everybody to follow the rules without having to actually talk to each other. I've always joked that the only thing I want from my neighbors is if they see my house on fire, I want them to call, and if they hear my wife screaming for help, that they actually send help. So I never want to live in an HOA. It's funny, the house I'm in was here before the neighborhood and other things were built around. So our house back in the woods is outside the HOA, but a lot of the houses that we can see if we go to the end of our driveway, all of them are in an HOA. So there's always kind of this weird relationship between us and the other people in the neighborhood because we kind of live outside the law. Armand says, I hate my HOA. If I want to garden naked, it's my house. Well, I guess, maybe that's an argument for HOAs if that's the only thing stopping Armand from his particular gardening. But, this is America, and he lives in Florida, so there should be no rules on Armand Rosamilia. All right, so the HOA dues supported the green spaces in his neighborhood, so maybe their money was being used for good purposes, but the place is full of zombies now, so what good does it do? Now all HOAs are gone. It's the zombies making the rules now. At least that cost is off my plate, he said, muffled into the crook of his arm. His own lawn was in need of mowing and tending. Cobb prided himself on his yard space, even though he hadn't done any of the work himself for decades. He had great succulents and squat palms in a rock bed filled with bright white, gray, and tan river stones that were almost too smooth, round, and perfect to be natural. They were, though. He'd paid plenty for that look. A flagpole missing its state and national flags stood bright and tall exactly where the HOA approved. He had, of course, not ventured outside to raise those flags since all this started. Seeing Randall What's-His-Name and his young wife, third or fourth marriage, let's be specific, third or fourth marriage, Cobb couldn't remember, getting torn apart in the middle of their quiet side street was enough to convince him to stick with indoor living for a while. All right. Tom says, pretty sure gardening naked in Florida is legal. I'm sure a lot of things in Florida are legal or are decriminalized in the sense that you can get away with almost anything. All right. But here he was. The street was still stained at the place of their deaths. She had gotten up again, wandered away. Randall had not, but there was no sign of his remains now. Let's say Cobb didn't care to explore what that might mean. Okay, there we go. Good stuff. All right. Cobb recognized some of the undead through their bloody masks of injuries, people he was friendly with, but who he did not trust to be friendly now. Zombies, the ones in real life anyway, seemed to always go for faces and necks. Every new recruit was an awful mess. All right, he did his best to stifle another cough, but some of the closer monsters heard him and turned in his direction. More picked up on the movement and joined in on closing the distance. Cobb was closed out of his garage, but had to decide where he wanted... No, it doesn't need to be but, it needs to be so. All right. Cobb was closed out of his garage, so he had to decide where he wanted to go from here. Away would probably be the best choice, but let's see what old Cobb decides. Almost on impulse, no real planning involved, he picked up one of the precious rounded river stones out of the immaculate bedding. There weren't many kids in this neighborhood, probably only a couple, but Cobb put a lot of time into shooing them away from his rocks. A good round rock was awfully tempting to a young boy. An entire landscaping feature of them had to be maddening. Cobb was far from boyhood, but he could recall that instinct just the same. Let's say, still, they needed to stay off his damn lawn. As far as he was concerned. Yelling at kids to get off your lawn is really the penultimate experience of being retired, I guess. Okay, he bounced the bright white stone in his hand, in his hard-lined palm a couple times. I've lost my ability to say words. I hope that doesn't affect my writing career. This was a stupid plan, no plan at all, really, but he hurled the rock at the scattering of bodies heading toward him. Cobb felt something give in his shoulder with a warning twinge of pain. You aren't young anymore, you old fool. Let's say that twinge said. Okay. All right. The rock. Let me be sure I'm on screen there. The rock arced nicely. It spun with a deadly twirl that any curveball pitcher would envy, he thought. It bounced off the closest zombie's shoulder. Cobb would bet that shoulder was dislocated at least. The sound of the impact was quite satisfying, but even this old fool knew he needed to aim for the head and do more than dislocate. He held his back as he took up 2 more hefty stones. As the zombies mounted the curb and crossed his lawn, at the farthest, okay, let's see if we can spell something. At the farthest point of his lot, he connected with heads this time. One skull cracked for sure, and he crushed another nose into nothing, but he put none of the monsters down. No good. As he bent down to arm up in both hands again, he planned to make his way around the house and use the rocks as bludgeons if any of them got a hold of him. Cobb still had some bulk and strength even at this age, but he had personally seen groups of these things take down, much younger and fitter men than him. All right, that works. As he stood up straight, he stared at the backs of his attackers retreating into the street. I need a comma. No, I need a period there and not a comma. That was a typo. And the point of editing sometimes is just to get rid of the typos, if nothing else. Not that he was complaining, but he didn't get it. Some commotion and the ongoing lack of a plan kept Cobb planted on that little island of concrete with a rock in each hand and eyes fixed on the wandering dead. It wasn't long before the 2 bicycles zipped through. One of the boys pointed at the lawn, and they both hopped the curb and tore through the grass at Cobb. Let's say normally he'd yell his ever-loving head off for that offense, but his lawn was already losing its shine along with the rest of the world. Okay. All right. Stepping off with the bikes still rolling, the front wheels bounced off the siding and fell over on the edge of Cobb's rocks. Okay, Nolan Hemphill said, "Sorry about your lawn, Mr. Jolson." The other boy, Jordan Merrifield, added, "And the house. We're in a hurry, the zombies and all." Cobb wondered how much of an a-hole he had been that 2 boys fleeing a horde of zombies still felt they needed to apologize for riding on the lawn. Okay. He had a reputation, obviously. Let's change this. He'd developed a reputation, obviously. Cobb was far more concerned about the mob of creatures coming after them and him again. All right, don't worry about it. Can you 2 throw? Nolan and Jordan accepted the rocks from Cobb's hands like they were being given some great honor. This was still a stupid plan, but Cobb was starting to think he might be in shock. The boys turned and hurled their stones. One stuck in a zombie. Let's say stuck in a zombie's forehead. One stuck in a zombie's forehead and staggered it. The creature regained its balance and kept coming. The other stone split a young undead woman's scalp right down the middle, and she twisted as she folded to the ground. All right, I'm actually going to change this. Let's say it's stuck. No, I'm going to leave it. I can change it later if I decide. I think I meant to do something else with that moment, but it doesn't matter right now. Nolan cheered as Jordan groaned. You have to aim, Nolan said. Jordan held out his hands. I hit it in the head. Well, hit it harder. Nolan then looked up at Cobb. Can we get more rocks? Cobb glanced at the corner of his porch behind the house and then at the closed door behind him. He had no good options with more of those things coming. Yes, please, boys, knock yourselves out. Nolan passed a rock to his friend. We should knock them out instead. Hand me one too, son. Make it a good one. Both the boys dropped a zombie each as on Cobb's unkempt grass. Hold on just a moment. I'm sorry. Thirsty work. All right. Both boys dropped a zombie each on Cobb's unkempt grass. His throw went wide, and his shoulder gave him another stinging warning of his age. Try again, Mr. Jolson. Nolan passed out stones for another volley. Call me Cobb. It only seems fair with us fighting side by side. He eyed the creatures closing in. If they get too close, you boys get on your bikes and circle around the house to get away. Take the trail to the lake back there and then keep going wherever you can. Let's say he left out the part where he would try to hold them off so the boys could get away. That might make up for all those years of yelling about his stupid lawn. This truly might be his last stand. Hell of a world, wasn't it? All right, that works fine, I guess. All right, Nolan was still paying attention as still paying attention to Cobb as Jordan downed a large undead man in some sort of uniform spoiled by old blood. He took up another stone on his own. Less talking, more braining, soldiers. Nolan took one out too and rearmed himself. Cobb considered his options. His shoulder did not have great range of motion. All right. Oh, Tempest, thanks for being here. Glad you stopped by, and hello back to you as well. All right. As Jordan downed a large undead man, his shoulder did not have a great range of motion. The boys seemed to be following some sort of sport training or primal instinct in their overhand throws. Cobb remembered skipping stones over water. He still did that on rare occasion on that lake back through the woods on days cool enough not have mosquitoes. He wasn't sure it would work, but he flicked one sidearm and it curved right into the brow of an older undead woman, probably from this neighborhood, with a lot of exposed skull showing through her torn skin. The stone blasted through the head and kept going. It tore off the side of another zombie behind the first, and they both went down. Nolan passed another stone to Cobb. That was awesome. A double, Jordan said. Can you teach us how to do that? You're doing fine, boys. Don't change horses midstream. What? Just stick with what's already working for you. Let's say I mean. That works. They continued their defensive assault from Cobb's side yard. The boys did try a couple sidearm flicks. The stones tore up the undead, but usually missed their heads. They each stuck with their prime techniques. Let's say the three of them. The three of them. All right. The three of them each stuck with their prime techniques. The yard filled with bodies that stunk too terribly for the smoke to cover any more. Just say it would only get worse with time. All right, I'm going to need to remember that later, that there's a bunch of stinky bodies in the yard. The ones flowing from the street started to thin out, and the field of downed zombies slowed their progress across the lawn. The trio of unlikely warriors missed a few times, but not often. With the slower progress and wider spread of approaching trouble, they were able to alternate throws, rest, and take careful aim each time. Nolan juggled 2 stones from hand to hand as he waited his next turn. Let's say as he awaited his next turn. Let's get fancy in here, right? That's how Nobel Prize winning authors write. They say awaited instead of waited. He awaited his next turn. Mr. Cobb, what are you planning to do? The old man glanced at the door behind him and said, I was thinking of running for it, but I don't know where. I think I can take care of a problem inside that gave me trouble this afternoon. He says, let's do but here. But I think I can take care of a problem inside that gave me trouble this afternoon. Then I can stay here a while longer, I guess. I have a good bit of non-perishable food. Keeping extra supplies on hand is an old habit from my mother in my youth. Cobb paused to make his throw. It was a little farther than he usually tried, but he'd rather take an extra throw than to let them get any closer. Let's say instead of them, let's say those things. Then let those things get any closer. The creature's skull and brains blasted apart in dozens of pieces. Let's say into. Sorry, there's so many micro changes here. Into dozens of pieces from the direct hit to the temple. He started to suspect that zombies attacking the heads of their victims was weakening their skulls somehow. Nolan used one of his stones to take one down still well in the street. They were all getting good at this. Maybe cocky was a better word for it, which could be dangerous. But it was a dangerous world now, no matter how you faced it. All right, that's good. I am like that. Cobb asked, where are your families? Both kids looked at each other and then away as they rearmed themselves, and Cobb, that seemed answer enough, but no one spoke anyway. It was bad. My dad tried to go for help and more supplies, but he got overwhelmed, and my uncle tried to help. My folks tried too, Jordan said. My mom. In that pause, Cobb considered that it was probably his job to put an arm around the boy, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. This was an era where you kept away from other people's kids. Nolan gathered himself and spoke over a grunt, and he opened another zombie's head some distance away. No, let's say as. So he's grunting because he's throwing. Gathered himself and spoke over a grunt of effort as he opened another zombie's head some distance away. It wasn't his turn, but neither of them said anything about it. My mom is the only reason we got to our bikes and away. Jordan took an extra... Okay, hold on, let me do this. Cobb thought that was the sign of a true hero, making her last stand to let the boys get away to fight let's say for now. Cobb thought that was the sign of a true hero, making her last stand to let the boys get away for now. He felt a certain responsibility to make that motherly sacrifice matter. Okay. That adds some kind of weight and pathos to the story, I think. When you're writing a silly zombie story, you can use all the help you can get. Jordan took an extra turn, ridding the world of one more zombie. We tried to get out of the neighborhood, but we just kept drawing them in. You guys can stay here once I clean up something inside. Maybe we can come up with a plan together after something to eat and a little rest. The boys exchanged another look and nodded their acceptance. You know what? I'm going to change this. Nodded their agreeance. See, that's a... Now I just need to spell it right. I'm trying to get fancy. Grievance, no. Agreeance. See if that does something. Agreeance. There it is. All right. You just keep randomly putting letters in until the computer says you spelled it right. The boys exchanged another look and nodded their agreeance. Now, when someone reads that, they're going to think I'm fancy, but they won't know that it took me forever just to spell that word. All right, maybe we finish off these last few, Jordan suggested, and then they might not figure out we're inside. Just then, a golf cart buzzed around the corner and ran up in Cobb's drive. Lydia Quirk, in her mid-70s, I guess that's a hyphenated word, behind the wheel, called out, "You got a charger we can use?" Cobb glanced over his shoulder. In the garage, but I can't get to it just yet." Daisy Lockridge, next to Lydia, pushing 80, said, "Sorry for the trouble, but we have some friends behind us." All right. As if on cue, the shoulder... Hold on. I was on the wrong screen there. All right. I guess this is... Yeah, I need to fix that shoulder to shoulder. I usually don't spell that with hyphens, so I've probably been wrong all this entire time. As if on cue, the shoulder-to-shoulder pack. Okay, because it's describing pack, that's why it needs to be hyphenated. If I said you were just standing shoulder to shoulder, then I probably wouldn't need the hyphens. Okay, that's what it is. As if on cue, the shoulder-to-shoulder pack of zombies moaned into view. I know that's not technically right because moaned isn't a motion, but I think it works just fine. The trio took up their rocks and started unloading before any of the monsters reached the grass. It was hard to miss with so many of them together. Cobb broke a sweat and took deep breaths as he pressed on with the mission. He didn't even notice... Alright, I got an extra word in there, I think, but let me see if it makes sense. He didn't even notice the two ladies joining in until their stones started taking the undead heads right off their shoulders. How? Nolan asked with more awe than he had shown Cobb's sidearm technique. Cobb was impressed too. Alright, that's the wrong kind of two. Nothing makes me feel dumber than the homophone problems. If I put in the wrong homophone, I'm in trouble. Okay. Daisy went on decapitating the creatures one at a time as Lydia laughed and said, "Wreck ball." Let's say, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. That's amazing, Jordan said, and as... All right. That's amazing, Jordan said, as... Okay, come on now, Jay. What are you just making up random things now? That's amazing, Jordan said, as he split another head just on the edge of the lawn. Overhand and follow through, Daisy said. They even took time to show the boys what they meant. Neither of the young men took off a head, but they added more power and accuracy. The dead thinned and then petered to quiet. The fires in sight had burned themselves down to blistered boards and cinders. Cobb held his knees and waited for his heart to catch back up. Daisy reached for the knob behind Cobb. Say doorknob. reached for the doorknob behind Cobb. He didn't even move. He didn't even move to stop her. I think it's locked. We'll need to go around, and I'll have to find where I hid the key from myself. I'll put a comma there. Well, yeah, that's where it goes. The knob did turn, though. I need another comma there. I'm just going to spend all my time reading a few words and then putting in commas. The knob did turn, though, and the door burst open as a figure plunged through, not trough, through and slammed into Cobb's back. This sentence is a good example of why English is a mess. He let out a strangled cry as he tried to twist away. He ended up on his back with the undead on him, with the undead body on him, snapping her teeth. He would feel that fall if he survived until morning. He was lucky he didn't break a hip. Maybe not mowing your lawn had some advantages. Okay. Lydia let out a breathless word. Piper? Cobb held his wife's teeth, still all her own, unfortunately, away from his face. But his arms shook from the day's rock throwing. The boys wrestled her off sideways and pinned her to the ruined grass beside Cobb. Nolan lifted a rock over his head and hers. Mr. Jolson, we have to, okay? Cobb nodded, but then said I should do it. He struggled to get to his feet again as the boys held down Piper. Then, before he could gain his feet, she broke free of their grasp. He rolled for them to pull the boys away instead of going for her or protecting himself. 2 stones whistled through the air and connected with a sharp clack inside his wife's brains. Let's say her head and face lost their shape. He was thankful she landed face down after it was over. All right, let's say he felt bad. He hadn't handled that. Instead of running away outside. But what would the boys have done then? Maybe it all worked together for the good, like Piper always said before she tried to kill him. All right. Lydia said, I'm very sorry, Cobb. No, he shook his head and turned away. Thank you. I should have handled it myself, but it was just a scratch. I didn't even know if it was from one of them. I just waited too long. Wrong kind of 2 again. That's what editing is for, is to fix all these little things so I don't look stupid later. It's good to look stupid now, I guess, on stream, but not later. Not later. I just waited too long and then got caught up here with all of them. Not your fault, Daisy said. Yeah, we're all doing the best we can, Nolan added. Cobb swallowed a few times on a dry throat. Well, everyone come in. We can clean up, eat, and rest. We're going to keep going, Lydia said, if we can get that charger. It's getting late. Cobb made a point of looking to the sky. There are people we need to check in on, Daisy said. They did all take tea and clean up inside as the charger worked on the cart outside. Everyone went out together and stood near the rocks until they knew it was clear. Cobb let the ladies keep the charger, and they promised to come back if they found help. Cobb thanked them but doubted he'd ever see them again. The boys stayed with him a while. He worked on their bikes a bit and found them comfortable places to sleep. I'm going to add a little something in here. killing all those zombies was a good thing for many reasons. But eventually, the stink of rot was too much. It was too much for towels under doors to hold out any longer. Say to keep out any longer. You could get used to bad smells in time, but they were always there. Say it was like being trapped inside a fresh tomb. All right, here we go. In the end, they didn't come up with a plan. In the end, they did come up with a plan. It was a shame they couldn't bring the great throwing rocks with them, but they did set out together, and they did quite well for themselves, all things considered. All right, so that is the end of that story.